Hopefully that's not.
Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast. This is the last Pewter Report podcast of 2021. That's right. The next time you see us, it'll be for the Bucs game day against the New York Jets on Sunday. I believe that's January 2nd, but we'll get to that in just a minute. I'm your host today, Matt Matera, and joined with me is someone who's been on the podcast a lot lately and absolutely crushing it. It is the very talented Casey Hudson. Casey, how are you doing this afternoon?
You are so nice, Matthew. I appreciate it. I'm good. I'm just trying to figure out what day of the week it is. And, Sunday will help me regulate my schedule when it's time for game day. But other than that, I'm ready to welcome in 2022. And I'm actually not anxious about the new year for once in my life. So that's definitely something to look forward to.
That's good. I think New Year's gets a little overrated. I enjoy the holiday, I enjoy celebrating it, but I think there's, in people's minds, they automatically think like, oh my God, I have to do this and go crazy and go all out. If you want to do that, that's fine. If you want to do something at home with family and friends, that's good too. I think we got to stop putting New Year's on a pedestal, because in my opinion, it's just the next day on the calendar. You could start your New Year's resolutions in November if you really wanted to.
You could, and it would take some of the pressure off, honestly, because then the biggest debate is like, what do you do the next day? Well, everybody wants to just chill the next day. Some of us psychos are already trying to start that diet and the meal prep and all the things. Yeah. So, this year I'm just ready to ease into it, coast into 2022.
Absolutely. And a lot of people, their New Year's resolutions are getting into shape, me included. That's been that way for the last couple of years. Hasn't really worked, but maybe this year. But a huge way to help get into shape is by having a Celsius energy drink. And of course, the Pewter Report podcast is brought to you by Celsius. Casey just holding it up there before I cut her off and put up the Celsius picture. Guys, if you don't know by now, we are so happy, proud, and lucky to have Celsius energy drink as the sponsor of the Pewter Report podcast. You have to go out and try these energy drinks if you haven't yet. Not only is it the best energy drink out there because you get no post jitters, you get none of that anxious feeling after drinking it, but these flavors, I'm not kidding, are fantastic. You got strawberry, kiwi, guava, tropical vibe, orange alone. Orange is just great. Wild berry, so many different flavors. It's just an absolutely fantastic drink to have. So make sure you go to your local stores. I see it in gas stations all over the place, and Walmarts and different convenience stores. I see it, almost anywhere I go now, which is great. And you can get it on Amazon as well. So make sure you check out any Celsius energy drink, because I guaranteed you will not be disappointed.
100%. I finally started to get out of my box a little bit. I also ran out of my favorite flavor, so I was forced to. But wild berry, I thought it would taste like medicine, and that's actually what I've had. I'm on my almost third one of the day. It's been a day. Clearly.
You're on your third one of the day.
Yeah, there's a lot to do.
That is something.
A lot to do. But at least this will help carry me through this Q&A and talking Bucs and talking Jets and all the things. It's for real, guys. A Celsius withdrawal is real. So not doing that.
Ain't that the truth? Yeah. So again, thank you, Celsius, for being our sponsor. As we were promoting today, this is a Bucs Q&A. Feel free to ask us anything related to the Bucs, the Jets, anything with the NFL that's going on, because there's never a lack of topics when it comes to the NFL. And so as we wait for the questions to roll in and everything, Casey, I want to hear your overall thoughts about this upcoming game against the New York Jets. Obviously, the Bucs are heavily favored, even with the number of injuries and players on the COVID list that they have. But there's 2 games left in the season. Still a lot to play for in terms of seeding and where they can end up for the postseason. And so tell me what you're thinking.
I know. It's the exciting part is that the chance of the Bucs winning out is clearly way higher, regardless of the injuries and all the COVID stuff that's kind of taking place and a ripple effect. I think at this point, well, it's only Thursday, but I think at this point, it's almost safe to say who is going to be a part of the game on Sunday and who is not. I would love to see the Bucs just kind of have a standout performance and build off of what they did versus the Panthers, because there was just so many guys who are either younger guys or veterans that are kind of looking for that second chance in the league that really showed up on Sunday. So I could definitely see Brashad Perriman contributing. I was looking forward to having him back the other week. And then, of course, he didn't clear COVID protocols, not because obviously that whole fun, exciting call that we had with him versus the Bills, but just because of how much I think he can contribute while Chris Godwin and some other guys are out. I also think that it's going to be another big day for the defense. We're hearing for the most part that they should be a collected unit besides the couple guys that are going to be out with COVID. But these are guys that have been out in other games while the Bucs defense has progressively stepped up over the last, 4 games or so. So I think it's going to be a solid win. I think Tom Brady definitely wants to close out these last 2 games on the highest note possible. And I think if you listen to pressers today, you could hear the coaching staff kind of leaning towards the fact that these younger guys are now really being forced to step up, especially after what they did the other week. So I think that the Bucs will go in and have a pretty grand old game. And maybe, just maybe, they might hopefully get a guy like Mike Evans back. Rick Stroud tweeted today that he was actually out at practice, running some routes, not fully participating in practice, but running some routes, probably getting his lungs about him, because once you clear COVID, depending on what your symptoms are, that's the first thing. I know that I struggled with breathing for weeks after. So I think all of us want to see Mike Evans come back, because this guy's trying to break 1,000 yards once more for the 8th time this season?
It would be the 8th time this season. And yes, it would be huge if Mike Evans can come back. It's funny because it's one of those things you want to balance. You want to get the record. It's, Mike Evans, I believe, and a lot of us believe, is a future Hall of Famer. And to have a record like that, to extend it as much as you possibly can. And you have to remember, as great as his record is for Mike, it has more of a chance to be broken now because there's that extra regular season game. So any player entering the league now, if fully healthy for a full season, will have that opportunity to get one more game to get 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
We got a comment here from Harvinder Sania. I hope I'm saying that correct. He said 1,000 yards is great and all that, but why risk your hamstring ending your whole season when you could just rest an extra week and prepare for the playoffs? Seems silly to me. I get your point, totally.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, you want all these players as healthy as possible for the postseason. So if that means the Bucs win the Super Bowl and Mike Evans doesn't get 1,000 yards, Mike Evans will 100 million billion% sign up for that. But I think there's also a point to be made about having too much rest. I fall in the middle of the rest versus rust thing. I think if you sit out for so long and then you go in and play a game, it might take you a little bit to really get it going. The big thing, and Scott Reynolds brought it up too, that I find interesting and I agree with. Mike only needs 101 yards. So if you want to sit him out this week and then go for it next week, that's fine, because you're going to New York. It's going to be cold. The weather's probably going to be, 35 degrees and below. Right. Would you rather play in that weather with a hamstring injury that's a soft tissue thing and could act up in any moment? Or would you rather play in Tampa when you're at home? You could sleep in your own bed, get as much treatment as you possibly can. I think odds were that he's going to play in the Carolina game to begin with. But I think it's a fair point that you look at last season, they tried to feed him that ball in the last game against Atlanta, and he ended up getting hurt and almost missed the Washington game. And then he balled out in that Washington game in the postseason. But yeah, it's definitely a fair question. I think there's a fine line to both of it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the top of your sentence is 100 yards is great. You have to think what these guys, what they work so hard for, what they put their bodies through, what they force their mental muscle to do. It's to really, not that they're working towards these accolades, but it's the fact that, if he hits that 8th 1,000 yard season, what that's going to do, down the line for his career or in general, to make it that far, to be short 101 yards, that might hurt. And I totally agree with the fact that it may not be worth doing it versus the Jets, especially between the weather and the fact that cold weather is not good for any injury. But you said something really profound, Matt, to the fact of sometimes you really just kind of have to get moving eventually. I've dealt with a couple injuries as a previous athlete, and honestly, they've never asked you to just kind of be still. They've asked you to do as much as you can and kind of stack on top of it, because if you start letting that muscle, that tissue heal in a certain way, then you're kind of adding another injury that can get irritated down the line. So the simple thing is that he can go up to the Jets, he can play a couple, get a couple yards, minimize that 101, not wear himself out, not anything too crazy, and then have a decent stack to put up versus the Panthers, because I started looking into it. In the last 4 games that Mike Evans has played in versus the Panther, he's only broken 100 yards one time. And that was the first game of last season. So 2019, he only hit like 77 yards in 96. Last year, 104 in the first game. And I think it was like 61 in the second game. So you can't exactly put all your chips on that final game of the season if a goal for him is to break 1,000 yards. He's going to either have to split it up, or imagine the mentality of an athlete going into the final game of the season wanting to break 100 yards. That's probably a lot more pressure than doing a little bit now and a little bit later. So I would prefer, if that's his goal, to see him in versus the Jets, contribute on some big downs, and then kind of relax.
Yeah, Casey, that's a great point that you brought up, because I was running it through my head too before this podcast of like, okay, what if he plays just the first half against the Jets? Because let's face it, it was insane what Antonio Brown did against Carolina last week, but Carolina still has one of the top pass defenses in the NFL, where Mike Evans is more likely to break that record against, or at least, break a chunk into that record against the Jets, who their best cornerback is a guy named Bryce Hall, who isn't even the most famous Bryce Hall. If you're into, YouTube and, YouTube reality stars and stuff like that. Yeah, thank you. So, some people on this chat will get that. Others will be like, what the heck are you talking about? But Mike Evans has a better chance of, if he was going to play one game, get 101 yards, it would be against the Jets than it would be against Carolina. So I think you bring up a really great point right there. We're going to move on to, we're going to stick with the wide receivers, but move to a different question here from John C. He says, who will become wide receiver 3, Perryman, Johnson, or Grayson? So I guess this is saying if Mike Evans is playing. If let's do it both ways. If Mike Evans is playing, I think without question, it's going to be Brashad Perryman as the 3, because it's just, the coaching staff, they trust him more than anyone else. I think he's a good fit for that number 3 receiver. Brashad Perryman doesn't really have an issue getting open. It's making those tough catches, or making catches in general, that has kind of been an issue since he's played with the Bucs in his 2 stints here in Tampa Bay. So to answer that part of it, I think it's, Brashad Perryman is the number 3. Let's just say hypothetically Mike Evans doesn't play and Perryman becomes that number 2. Who becomes the number 3? Is it Tyler Johnson or Cyril Grayson? I'll leave it up to you, Casey.
Honestly, I don't mean this to sound as disrespectful as it's going to sound, but you guys might just want to remove Tyler Johnson from the conversation for a minute. He's had a lot of opportunity in the past. I mean, not even in the past, this whole season, he's had a lot of opportunity, and he just really kind of hasn't found his way all the way. Tom Brady kind of was asked about what he whispered in his ear in a red zone play, and he just somewhat alluded to the fact that Tyler Johnson wasn't fully aware of what was happening on the play. And I think that this happens a lot more than we probably notice, or that we probably hear about, because these guys are about protecting their teammates, which I am all about. But Tyler Johnson's kind of struggling. His best game was versus the Saints this season, and we haven't seen that player yet. So for me, it would be either Cyril Grayson or Brashad Perriman. Now, obviously, there's a big high because of what Perriman did do versus the Bills, but I think Cyril Grayson almost showed himself to be that much more reliable, because any opportunity he's gotten, he's made the most of it. They may have an equal distribution of drops between the pair of them. So at that point, you're just looking for size versus speed and whatever the situation is on the field in that moment. If I had to choose, which I don't like doing, but I'm not going to be JC, I think that they probably go with Cyril Grayson. I think that they let him build off the momentum from the Panthers game, for one. With Perriman coming back from COVID protocols, again, you can't really dictate what a player's, lungs and capacity is going to look like getting back on the field after dealing with, a situation like that, depending on what his symptoms are. Once again, I don't know what they were, but I think that they want to just build off the units that performed versus the Panthers, because you're going versus the Jets that's a little less of an issue, not that the Panthers were, then, why not do what you did and then some? Thanks, Shimmy.
Yeah, let's just pile. Don't mean to, but piling on JC here. Your hat game versus JC's hat game. It's it's a bloodbath in that terms. Yeah, if I have to pick one of the two, I'm a firm believer of what have you done for me lately? And obviously in that answer, it's Cyril Grayson Jr. for the big reception that he had, for the big block that he had on Keyshawn Vaughn's 55-yard touchdown run. And Bruce Arians, I don't want to say above all else, but it's very high up there, loves a great blocking wide receiver. And there's no replacing Chris Godwin. We all understand that. But in blocking situations, Cyril Grayson had that on the Keyshawn Vaughn run. And Tyler Johnson, the only time he was on TV, it felt like, in that game was when he was blocking on a screen for Antonio Brown. It was a 2nd and 1. And Antonio Brown caught it and got tackled right away. They still gave the Bucs the first down, which was very weird, because they should have just got the first down on the last play. They called it a 9-yard run, but it was like at least 10 yards. But I digress there. I think Cyril Grayson Jr.
Semantics.
What's up?
I said semantics.
Oh, yeah, of course. But yeah, what have you done for me lately? What have you done for me this season? Cyril Grayson has not gotten nearly as close to as much playing time as Tyler Johnson has. And Cyril had that touchdown against the Saints, the bomb from Brady to him. And then this game, arguably the best game of his career against Carolina with 3 receptions for 81 yards and probably should have had a touchdown. And he was the first one to clown himself after the post-game press conference. So I think it'll be more of a mixture of the two, really, to answer the question. I don't think it's just going to solely be one guy or the other. You're going to get both in there, which I think is very important. I was trying to find there was a question about Byron Leftwich. Yeah, I'm getting to it here. Ramey says, do you guys think if Byron leaves for a head coaching job, does that affect Brady and BA's tenure in Tampa? I wouldn't think so. Casey, I'll start it off with you.
I wouldn't think so either. I think that Tom Brady's, for the most part, in my honest opinion, I don't think Leftwich is going anywhere, at least in the next coming season. I think he's one of the younger guys in the head coaching conversation right now. So there's no rush to get there. But I think to be able to say that you coached a guy like Tom Brady and to keep collecting certain, awards and progressions under your belt, who knows what coaching opportunity is going to be open in another year or two, but I think it'll be just as good, just as big of an opportunity. But then you start getting even more experience with a 22-year seasoned veteran. So realistically, I don't think Byron Leftwich is going anywhere just yet, the same way that Todd Bowles didn't go anywhere last year. This team, with all the injuries and all the COVID situation that they have going on, they still have all that potential to go all the way. And if they go all the way this year, then you can bank on them doing, pretty epic things again one more year. So, but all that to say, I don't think it would affect their tenure.
Right. I think Bruce Arians obviously can find guys because he has more than just one Bruce Arians guy. So if Byron Leftwich were to leave, and I still feel like if I was another team, I just feel it's still a little too early for Byron Leftwich. He was offensive coordinator for a half a season in Arizona and then came over, and now he's in his 3rd year as the Bucs offensive coordinator, 2nd with Tom Brady. And he's obviously building up a really good resume, having the number 1 offense this year, won a Super Bowl last season. I just feel like you still need to do a little bit more just because he's still so young into it. And you look like an offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. I believe his name is Brian Daboll. That situation for like Jacksonville seems like it would fit more just because you're taking a guy that just worked with a young quarterback and Josh Allen and now has made him, one of the premier quarterbacks in the league. Can he do that again with Trevor Lawrence? Where Byron Leftwich really just comes into a situation where he had the greatest quarterback of all time right there. So could use a little bit more time for Byron Leftwich there. And if he were to go too, I mean, you have no shortage of options on the offensive side. I mean, one, Tom Brady will just do what he wants to do anyway, as he kind of mentioned there. You can go quarterbacks coach Clyde Christensen. That's a lot of C's and Q's right there in a row. But, he has experience calling plays before. Harold Goodwin, I think that could be a situation that he would welcome the opportunity, especially for a man himself that has said that he has aspirations to become a head coach one day. And he actually talked about a lot how a lot of times they look at offensive and defensive coordinators before they look at other assistant coaches that don't call plays. So maybe if he thinks if this helps me get a better chance of getting a head coaching job, then I think he would, without question, jump at the opportunity. Just wanted to give a shout out to Greg DeCruz here. He's always in all of our, podcasts, commenting on Twitter and Instagram, wishing everyone at Pewter Report a happy new year. Thinking about those who we lost this year, R.I.P. Mark Cook. I agree. R.I.P. Mark. He's the man. I miss him a lot. And thank you for that comment, Greg. Happy New Year to you as well. You're one of the best fans around. And We really appreciate all your communication with us here on the Pewter Report podcast. Scrolling down now, Nacho has been activated. That's good. We'll get, you know what? Let me get to the injury report right now because it just posted a couple of minutes ago.
Thankfully.
Some good news and bad news here for the Buccaneers. Antonio Brown did not participate with an ankle injury. With that said, Tom Brady didn't participate as well, but we know that Tom Brady is going to play on Sunday. Who knows if this is just a Veterans Day off or if this is actually a situation where that lingering ankle issue popped back up again and could be something there. So that's the bad news. The good news, Rashad Perriman, now that he's activated, he was a full participant today, so it looks like he'll be good to go playing against his former team, the New York Jets. And safety Antoine Winfield Jr. was limited in practice today, so he did not participate yesterday. He's back today, which that's huge, especially, I get it, it's the Jets, but knowing that you don't have Shaq Barrett, you probably don't have JPP, Levante David's not there, and Jamel Dean and Sean Murphy-Bunting are on the COVID list. You need as many guys as you can possibly get. In general, alone the secondary, who haven't had anyone this year, but to have Antoine Winfield Jr., if he could play in this game, you can't underestimate how important that is.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because we mentioned it before. You don't want to underestimate the Jets because they have been able to beat teams like the Titans and, some other teams.
And the Bengals.
And the Bengals. That was the other one, 34 something, I believe. But when you think about it, they've been able to put up points. Some of these other teams that the Bucs have faced in the past couple of weeks, they're teams that have barely broke 17 points or, are they going to break 17 points versus the Bucs? You don't want to be in that situation or assume that that's going to be the case with the Jets. They do well with actually getting points on the board. It's just the fact that they're not the strongest team overall. So if the Bucs are extremely depleted, you're going to give a team like the Jets an opportunity to, win. Maybe not anything outstanding, but still just enough to get by.
Yeah, that's a great point right there. It's just so funny because I've watched the Jets for a very, very long time, and I've seen heartbreaking losses. I've seen games that they had no business winning and they go and win. And I've seen a lot of humiliating and debilitating losses. And just one thing I've learned about the Jets is just don't bet on them because it's going to end up in heartbreak. But if you were going to bet, and the Jets are clearly the underdog in this game, a perfect place to go and bet would be Underdog Fantasy, a proud sponsor of the Pewter Report podcast. Underdog Fantasy, it's great to start your NFL season by sorry, I'm trying to get this comment off here. It's great to start your season. They have so many different fantasy drafts, different events to get you ready for your fantasy football season itself. But they have a ton of things in season as well, which I'm really a big fan of. They have so many different prop bets where you can go and you could place a bet on, such as who will have more receiving yards this week, Antonio Brown or Braxton Berrios? Obviously, that answer is going to be Antonio Brown. But they have so many different live in-game situations that you can place money on. They have weekly drafts as well, too. So if you're not into the long haul of the season, you just want to do it on a daily or weekly situation, you could do in-game drafts with right there on Underdog Fantasy. And one other thing that is super important that you should know about is that for Underdog Fantasy, they are doing promotion right now where if you use the promo code Pewter, as you can see on the screen right there, use the promo code Pewter and they will match up to $100 worth in promo codes. So, sorry, that didn't make sense. Use the promo code Pewter. They will match up to $100 that you put into your account. So you put in $100, they'll match that. Bam, you got $200 right then and there, and you can go and put that on the Bucs. You can go put that on one of your daily fantasy teams. Whatever you want to do, make sure you're doing it at Underdog Fantasy. And we thank them for being a sponsor of the Pewter Report podcast. Going to get to some other questions here. There's one by Emily that I was trying to find. I got to give John credit because doing the show and then like navigating through the comments and everything too, it's
you have
it's
to
not
be
as
quite
easy
the
as it looks.
multitasker.
But, shout out to John for that. Yeah, Emily, this was the question that what's up?
No, I said he's quite the
Oh,
multitasker.
sorry.
You have to be.
Yeah, so Emily here with a good question, and we want to talk about Keyshawn Vaughn as well too. I'm not really
Mhm.
a Vaughn fan, but do we use him a lot in the game to see if he really has anything? To me, in the last game, he took one step forward, then took two steps back with yet another drop pass. Emily, you are 100% spot on. Keyshawn Vaughn, he obviously had the 55-yard run, but after that, really didn't do too much in the ground game. It was really that was the highlight, and everything else was kind of fell out of place after that. The big thing, if you want to look at these last two games of the season and look at the future of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as well, Keyshawn Vaughn is the only running back under contract for next season. So the Bucs have a huge decision to make because it doesn't look like Ronald Jones is coming back. Leonard Fournette has been fantastic, but what's his market going to be? You don't want to overpay for a running back no matter how great Leonard Fournette has been this season. And Giovanni Bernard, obviously huge in the passing game, but he's a veteran on a small contract. So even if he were to get brought back, he wouldn't be the number one guy. Keyshawn Vaughn, this is a huge opportunity for him to prove that he should be the guy next year. Now, I imagine the Bucs will probably go out and look at a running back in the draft. Maybe not the first round, obviously, but that second, third, fourth round really could be a situation right there. But Keyshawn Vaughn, Bruce Arians said that, he's got good hands. I know he dropped one or two, but he's working on it. You have to prove that, man, because Bruce Arians said the same thing about Ronald Jones. And Ronald Jones is what it is when it comes to passing, which is if he's wide open and no one's around him, yeah, he'll catch it. But he's not going to make those swing passes. He's not going to make those difficult ones. The ship has sailed on Rojo as far as a receiving back, and probably with his time with the Bucs, no matter how great of a run he has these next two games. But Keyshawn Vaughn, he's got a lot to prove. I don't know yet if he could be a number one running back just because we haven't seen him in that situation. But there's no doubt that this is a huge moment for him.
Oh, absolutely. Great question, by the way, Emily. I do think that we will see a lot more of Vaughn in this game because Coach Arians said that he's a lead back. Not that Arians cares about proving anyone right or wrong, but it's just, I think that kind of alluded to the fact that he's going to give him a little bit more opportunity. So after hearing this lead back thing, of course, I kind of needed to geek out for a second and figure out why he called him that because I didn't agree with it whatsoever from what we've seen. Kind of looking back into Vaughn's history and stuff, he started his football career at Illinois and he had a great breakout season. I'm pretty sure he had like 723 yards to start. Then he got washed out by other running backs. He wasn't able to keep up. He wasn't able to compete. So then he ended up sitting 2017 so that he can transfer over to Vanderbilt back to his hometown. And when he got there, he learned from a guy named Ralph. I'm drawing a blank on his last name, but a lead running back, which was fantastic. Then he had 2,000 plus yard seasons. The first season he had like 13 receptions, I think 170 yards. The next season he had 28 receptions, 270 yards. So collegiate wise, he showed that he can, he had hands. He showed that he had so much potential. And clearly that's why the Bucs picked him up in the third round. But ever since he got here, it's just kind of been like is this guy a flop? But looking over all of that, I think what that showed me is that he's just one of those guys that takes a lot more time to really get his feet underneath him and really start to get into a rhythm. So maybe we're seeing the beginning of that now. Maybe we're going to see a whole different Keyshawn Vaughn towards the end of the season, playoffs, and then heading into next year, knowing that, he is the only contracted running back. Maybe that puts the right kind of pressure on his shoulders, but you saw great things with him in college. It's just, we know that sometimes it doesn't translate, especially in the running back group. But with what I saw in his stats in college, it just looks like it takes him some time. It looks like when that competition comes in, he takes a minute to like learn and kind of find who he is and his identity in that role before he really starts progressing. But the other thing that I found really interesting about Keyshawn Vaughn looking into him is that they kind of compared him to a one-trick pony. So he's not the kind of running back to where he might break a tackle or two, but it kind of affects his momentum and then it stops him from getting down the field. The best opportunity for him to get down the field as a running back is when he has a clear shot to just take off and use that speed. So you can't always count on that in the NFL. And if that's the best that he can do, then he's not going to have a future with the Bucs.
And it helps that you have 3 Pro Bowl offensive linemen blocking for you, a Pro Bowl alternate, and a guy that I think everyone believes should be in the Pro Bowl in
Hmm.
Donovan Smith. I think Keyshawn Vaughn, he's struggled horribly, to say the least, in the passing game. But I actually do think that, he still has a little bit more that he hasn't shown yet, to be totally honest with you. Do I think
Hmm.
that means he should be the number 1 running back on this team in 2022? No, absolutely not. But let's remember, he did, in the very limited amount of playing time he's had in his whole career, let alone this season. He does have a receiving touchdown from Tom Brady. It came in the regular season win against the Packers. So, yeah, there's no question that these are 2 huge games for him to at least put himself in the argument / discussion for training camp next year of,
Hmm.
okay, maybe we won't sign this veteran guy and we're just going to trust, Keyshawn Vaughn and whoever the other rookie that they draft. Let's have a competition between them and may the best man win. I think that's probably best case scenario for Keyshawn Vaughn right
Yeah.
now. Want to get to this real quick. Rock813 says, I can see that Jet fan with the hard hat screaming at Brady, LOL. He's talking about Fireman Ed. Fireman Ed is the guy that does the JETS chants. I just want to take this moment to say that Fireman Ed, he's like the head fan of the Jets fan base. Fireman Ed is an absolute fraud. He quit on the team a couple years ago when things were going bad. I think it wasn't too long after the butt fumble. He claims because other fans were being mean to him. If it's something like physical or whatever, that's not cool. Don't harass a guy like that. But when you're the number 1 fan of a fan base and people are giving you crap because your team stinks, that's part of the job, buddy. So I don't want to hear it that you quit on the team because they stunk and then all of a sudden they get a rookie QB and now you're back. That's BS. Fireman Ed is an absolute fraud. That guy stinks. He shouldn't be the number 1 guy of a fan base. That's why he's not a Hall of Famer, and Buck Nasty is for the Bucs. Fireman Ed, get out of here. Either stick with the team the whole time or relinquish the fanship, all right? Don't say you're the number 1 guy and then leave, and then all of a sudden, hey, things look kind of promising, I'm going to come back. That's not how being a fan works. So, Rock, thank you for that comment. I just wanted to get that off my chest. I appreciate all of you listening to me on that. Let's go through
Valid
some other
point.
comments here. Thank you. Vaughn is the new wild thing. I kind of like that. You don't really know what you're going to get in that
Hmm.
situation.
I do
If
agree, though.
Vaughn
The more touches he gets, the better. So we don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
If Vaughn comes in clutch by exploding in the playoffs, I'll buy his jersey. All right, we'll hold you to it, Ted Curtis. That could be a big thing right now. Since we're on the topic of playoffs, Casey,
Mhm.
how do you feel about just what would be an ideal matchup for the Bucs in the first round? Do you see them getting that number 2 seed? Because I think the number 1 seed is kind of out of the question right now. Just your overall thoughts of what's the best road for the Bucs to take in order to get back to the Super Bowl and win 2 in a row?
That's a great question, because I think more than likely they'll be at the 2 seed as well. But where does that place them in terms of their opponent? Potentially the
right now
Packers,
it'd be the Eagles.
Cardinals. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant the first round. So the first round, let's just say hypothetically the Bucs got the let's say the Bucs got the 2 seed. That would put them against either the Eagles. The Saints are right there, but the Saints, it seems like, just with their whole quarterback situation, I don't think they're going to get into the playoffs. And again,
Yeah.
Washington is another situation. So most likely it would look as that they would play the Eagles in the first round. And then after that, because they're the 2 seed, if they beat the Eagles, they would still have home field. And they end up probably playing either Dallas, because Dallas would probably be the 3 seed, either Dallas or the Rams or Arizona in that second round.
Okay. Great options. Well, I mean, with that first possible
Or the Niners
one,
as well, too. Sorry to interrupt you, but Niners
okay.
as well.
No, you're good. With the first possible one, honestly, I think it'd be a good game to see them go against the Eagles again. We know that they can beat them and then kind of, rest up and head into the second round. As for the second round, though, I would love to see the Bucs play the Cardinals. The the Cardinals kind of have that equivalent competitive nature where they've got some, a lot of talent, not as much as the Bucs, but they could really sneak up on you. So they'll give the Bucs enough of a challenge to kind of gun towards, heading back into a Super Bowl. If you go against the Rams, I think that's something that'll really speak to the talent of the Bucs, and I think that they'd be more hungry to beat the Rams with their talent sheet and after losing to them earlier in the season, because I know that it was kind of a split decision on whether or not they would have beat the Rams, but they definitely had the potential to do so. So I think that they would be that much more eager to kind of really show, okay, we were able to beat this team then, we can definitely beat them now, and then kind of step on them on their way towards the Super Bowl. But first round, I'd probably say the Eagles, unless the Saints signing Blake Bortles creates this magical turnaround for
Playoff
them.
Blake.
Look, I have so many emotions about that because, of course, like UCF alumni,
Yes, that's right.
I watched Blake play. So, it's tough because I've seen Blake Bortles really pull some things out of the hat. But in the same sense, I don't even know where Bortles has been since getting dismissed from the Green Bay Packers. So that would be interesting. And I know that the Bucs would probably love to show that they can actually beat the Saints and that they're not their kryptonite or whatever voodoo's going on over there. But I think the Eagles and just move forward, Cardinals, and keep powering through is what I'd like to see.
Yeah, so when I look at the playoff picture, I look at two teams that I think the Bucs absolutely need to avoid. And one of them is the Saints. And again, the more each week goes, the more it looks like the Saints aren't going to make the playoffs. So they exit that because the Saints have had their number, and we talked about that a ton. So we know what that. The other team, though, I think we're forgetting that has had the Bucs number a lot lately. But that's the Rams. Over the last two seasons, the Rams have defeated the Bucs and really beat them badly on both sides of the ball. I mean, they're as explosive on offense as the Bucs will see. Not many teams can go toe-to-toe with the Bucs on offense. The Rams are one of those. And when that defense gets cooking, Aaron Donald on the line, Jalen Ramsey, one of the best corners in the league, they just have a great scheme against the Bucs. There's certain teams that they get that right scheme, and it's given Tampa Bay some issues just in regular season games. So I really think playing against them would be tough for the Bucs. Really not concerned about Arizona, and they are slipping badly over the last couple of weeks. Dallas, again, with good offensive weapons, and their defense is insanely improved from a season ago. But I still like that matchup for the Bucs, even if they had to go into Dallas. I really don't think that'd be too much. I mean, it would be a very close game, but I would pick the Bucs to win that for sure. I do have a take that I don't know if I've said publicly, but I've said it to some people. Everyone's talking about, the NFC Championship game is going to be in Green Bay, and I'm not disagreeing with that. But I think the whole going to play in Lambeau in late January is not as intimidating as it once was. I mean, you look at the last couple NFC Championship games in Lambeau for the Packers, it hasn't worked well for the Packers. They lost. I mean, this goes back to Brett Favre, but they lost to the Giants when the Giants beat Brady in that first Super Bowl. They lost to the Giants again the second time that they beat Tom Brady. This one wasn't at Lambeau, but they got dominated by the 49ers when the 49ers went and lost to the Chiefs. And then the Bucs beat them in Lambeau last season. So
right.
I'm not saying that the Packers stink at Lambeau in the NFC Championship game, but they don't really have a recent history of dominating at home in the NFC Championship game. And you look at the last 2 weeks too, they're going to get the number one seed because they would have to lose 2 in a row, and they're playing the Lions, and they're not going to lose to the Lions, even though the Lions just beat Arizona. But you look at the last 2 games, they went on the road and barely beat a Ravens team that has 1,000 injuries on defense, and Lamar Jackson didn't play that game. And the only reason why they won is the Ravens decided to go for 2 and they didn't get it. And they should have gone for 2. They just had a terrible play call.
Yeah.
And then you look at the game against Cleveland, Baker Mayfield had 4 interceptions, and that 4th one came when the Browns had the ball and had a chance to score with under 2 minutes left to go ahead and win that game. It wasn't like Baker Mayfield had 4 interceptions and the Packers won by 20. They won by less than a touchdown in Lambeau. So again, let's not act like Green Bay all of a sudden is invincible. All right? Because they're really not. They haven't played. They played okay. They're winning. But you look at those last 2 games, and again, what have you done for me lately? And there's not much I've seen from the Packers that's like, oh my God, no one can go in there and win. because that just hasn't been the case. And we're lying to ourselves saying that it is.
I completely agree. I think it's just the intimidation factor of the history of that franchise where people want to keep gassing up Lambeau Field. But in all reality, I think you hit it on the head. Like they haven't really had an outstanding performance there in a while. I really wouldn't mind seeing the Bucs play them, but I do have to say I would be a bit of a mess watching the Bucs play the Cowboys right now. Somebody said in the comments, and I think it's the best way to put it, they're peaking at the right time. They might not have the hard part is it depends on how many players actually return to, contribute in playoffs, because some of these injuries or some of these guys you might not be able to count on for a certain amount of snaps. They might just be able to get in there a couple rotations to kind of help the team morale and energy and really hang out on the sideline. So that's the part that makes me a little bit more nervous. But the Cowboys could be a team to sneak. They're loading up offensively, being able to put points on the board, and their defense can do just enough to shut somebody out. So it would have to be a very healthy Bucs defense going against the Cowboys to see them pull that one off.
I hear you. I mean, you look at that Sunday night game against Washington. That was incredible. I mean, the fact that they put up 56 points, they scored on offense, defense, and special teams. We started rooting just for the fact we want to see history. We looked it up. The overall record for most points scored by one team is like 72. So it was like, that's probably not going to happen. But about fourth or fifth on the list was like 62, 63. So that was well within reach. And obviously they took out Dak. They took out Dak midway through the third quarter. So they probably weren't going to get it. They scored with the backup quarterback, Cooper Rush. So they were still kind of going for it for a little bit. Again, the only argument I would make there, while they are peaking at the right time, and Micah Parsons has been incredible, they played Washington twice and they played the Giants with Mike Lennon. So they haven't really exactly played against a team that strikes a ton of fear into you. But moving on, another question here from Emily. Gronk has been on a little bit of a slump here lately, but where the heck is OJ? What is it? Is he hurt? Is he not up to par? Is he not trusted? OJ was supposed to be a staple of our offense. Wasn't he? Question mark. Another great question from Emily. Casey, I'll let you tackle this one first.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Emily. He was supposed to be a staple in this offense, especially if you saw how he played with Jameis Winston as his quarterback. You thought that this guy was going to be progressively better, probably one of the leading tight ends of this franchise. Unfortunately, it looks like he's struggling to become that full tight end package. Coach Arians made a comment in post-game pressers, I believe, or Monday's pressers, saying that, he's doing well at the blocking, but that's really about it. Whereas, I don't see his blocking even being that consistent. I personally just feel like he hasn't mentally come back from that Achilles injury. I know that something like that can just cause such intimidation, and you have to have a hell of a mental muscle to make sure that you're pushing past, the fear of doing something like that again, because he was on a great climb last season. He was starting to get better in the passing game. His blocking was a little bit stronger, and now he looks like he's taken 5 steps backwards. So I don't see much of a change this season as the season starts wrapping up and heading into playoffs. But I know that the expectation was for OJ Howard to be a leading tight end for the Bucs.
Yeah, to answer the first part of it about Gronk, I wouldn't even call it a slump. I would just say it was a bad game against New Orleans. And then the game against Carolina, sure, the drop in the end zone was a mistake. Again, I don't consider this at all a thing that's going to continue. It was just a bad moment right then and there. And the game plan from the get-go was get the ball to Antonio Brown and let him do the rest. So I don't really think that's anything on Gronk. You go back to last season, there were many games starting out where the Bucs won and Gronk was mostly blocking and was, not a huge factor in the passing game. And then when they needed Gronk, that's what he became. And obviously he was a great receiving tight end for the start of this season too, had a 100-yard game once he came back from that rib injury. And there's just so much talent on this team, even with players out that, that was Antonio Brown's game. Gronk had that one reception for, I believe it was 22 yards. It's not a sign that he's struggling. That's just the way the game went. I mean, they won 32-6. It wasn't like, what? Gronk wasn't involved? Like, come on. As far as the OJ situation, Casey, I agree with you a ton. I truly think it's, overcoming that mental aspect of being able to play with a serious injury like an Achilles. I think that's really hampered OJ in his return. He hasn't really gotten too many opportunities, but he's not even beating Cam Brate out as the number 2 tight end. And Cam Brate is solid. He's obviously very steady in the red zone, and Bucs fans love him for that. And he's very helpful in that area. He just scored a touchdown in Carolina. But if you told me that in training camp, OJ beat out Cam for the second string tight end, I don't think anyone would be shocked. OJ, I still think is athletic, and I think he could really work on a couple of other different teams. I just think the way that the Bucs go about their offense, they've never really been extremely tight end heavy in the passing game as it is, even if you have 3 tight ends on the field. It really hasn't totally clicked since Bruce Arians has been the head coach here. And obviously OJ gets hurt a lot too, which really hasn't helped development. I'm still optimistic for OJ as a player in the NFL, but he's in a contract year with the Bucs, and I really don't think he's coming back to Tampa Bay. And again, it's a situation like the Bucs could be in a very weird situation where, there's no guarantee that Gronk's going to be back next year. He could just retire. And if OJ doesn't re-sign, then you're looking at Cam Brate as your number 1 tight end. And then you have a couple other guys like Cody McElroy that could end up making the team. But tight end is a position that the Bucs, aren't going to take in the top 3 rounds, but definitely could be a late round pick. You could see a tight end that could lobby to get some playing time in 2022. But a good question there, because I've been asked on radio about OJ. I think that tight end situation is very interesting because OJ had a good game against Philly, that Thursday night game. But when Gronk was out with his rib injuries, Cam Brate wasn't bad, but I wouldn't say he stepped up, and OJ didn't really step up. The tight end position just became blank. It was just you're blocking, and that's about it. There wasn't really too much of an impact in the receiving game that I think the Bucs would have, liked to see just a little bit more. I will say about OJ Howard, he is a pretty good bowler. I've seen him bowl at this place. Should be coming up. There we go. I've seen him bowl at this place, Pin Chasers, which is a proud sponsor of the Pewter Report podcast. Make sure, if you want to have a fun night out with your friends, family, anyone, take him out to Pin Chasers. There are multiple locations: East Pasco, Zephyr Hills, Midtown, Veterans. There's one right by the Tampa Bay Bucs facility. They have deals, Casey, like literally every single day. You got all-you-could-eat pizza on Tuesdays for $11.99. They got all-you-can-bowl on Thursdays and $1 Miller Lights. They have deals every single night. Their grill is great as well, too. You can get breakfast food whenever you want. It's better food than you would expect. It shouldn't. Sometimes bowling alleys, you might think not the best food. That's not the case here with Pin Chasers. It's very top-notch food. Their bar, they got a huge selection of drinks that you could want. You can get a bucket, a pitcher, whatever you want. So make sure you go to Pin Chasers. Go to pinchasers.net to reserve a lane or set up a party for, again, friends, family, or your kids. Make sure you check out Pin Chasers. And they are huge Bucs fans. So if you go there, you are supporting fellow Tampa Bay Bucs fans, which is always a great cause. Let's get back to some of the questions here. A lot of comments about the postseason. A lot of comments about the running back situation and what we just talked about with OJ and Gronk and everyone. Here's another one from John C. Le'Veon Bell, the 3rd down back this week. That is, I still think that's a little bit too early. I mean, I know that he played a little bit. He played a little bit on Sunday, pretty much in mop-up time after the game was done with.
Yeah.
And I know like Richard Sherman came in and was able to like play on the defense like so quickly. I do think it's slightly different on the offensive side because there's so many different things with pass blocking and different lingo there. But do you think that Le'Veon Bell, maybe not this week, but for the last game of the season and maybe going into the playoffs, could he be a 3rd down guy? Because we were talking about how Rojo doesn't have hands, and we talked about how Keyshawn Vaughn has struggled catching the easiest of passes. Could that be a role for Le'Veon Bell?
Maybe not this Sunday, but definitely versus the Panthers. I mean, Le'Veon Bell is known to have, or, it's been talked about that he has good hands and that he, was a pretty solid third down back when it came to his career with the Steelers. So I think for him, it's just getting acclimated into this system, as you mentioned, probably, getting dialed in on the terminology, because I think he had 3 opportunities versus the Panthers this past Sunday and had -1 yards. So clearly he's still getting situated. But the tough part is that any vet that the Bucs have brought in this season, they really have kind of been a flop. So I think a part of me is just really reserved to see or, hype up or back up the fact that this guy's going to come in and contribute, because any other guy is just kind of, RIP. They haven't been able to contribute. They've only done the bare minimum. It killed me. I grew up a big Richard Sherman fan because of his athleticism and his ability to back up what he was saying. And now he's Coach Sherm. So I'm not 100% sure. I think that they might just want to focus on the quote unquote potential future of this franchise, or anybody that they might be looking to give another opportunity to down the line, versus him. I think he's going to be more of like an emergency break that they pull if nobody else is getting the job done.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this too. They brought him in because Gio Bernard's not available, and obviously Leonard Fournette is on IR. But if those guys, I guess this is more for like Fournette. If Fournette is able to come back for the the first round of the playoffs, is Le'Veon Bell even on this team anymore, or do they just release him? Because you're obviously not going to get rid of Rojo, and I don't think you're going to cut Keyshawn Vaughn again when he's the only running back under contract. So this could just be like a 2-week, hey, come get a paycheck, not on his side. He obviously wants to stay on the team for the long haul and potentially win a Super Bowl and cap off what was a very interesting career. I mean, a great career at one point, and then, everything else in between that. But I don't know. It's very intriguing because you have to play someone on third down. And it's like, do you just keep trusting Vaughn? I do like every now and then they'll put like Cam Brate in the backfield. They're obviously not going to hand him off the ball, but he could at least, run out of there and, have a situation like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
He can break tackles.
Which I thought was pretty fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, he can. He's a physical guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's a physical guy. Let's see if we'll start wrapping it up soon. Russ says, I want revenge on the Rams. I hear that. The Bucs got revenge on the Saints last season, beating them in the divisional round, and then, and on the way to winning the Super Bowl. So I guess that'd be a nice little way to cap them off. But at the end of the day, if you win the Super Bowl, it doesn't really matter like whether or not you got revenge on this team or that team, because you're the last team standing,
I would like to see it just because I really felt strongly about them having the ability to win that game, but I would have to see the full-blown healthy roster that this season started out with before SMB got hurt in game 1, I think quarter 1 versus the Cowboys. Like the guys who initially stepped onto the field in the 2021 season, I would need to see all of them versus the Rams, because they're just stacked on both sides of the ball. An equally talented roster in comparison to the Bucs. So great game, sure. But if you have a depleted Bucs versus the Rams, I wouldn't want to see it. Not as somebody who grew up watching the Bucs her whole life. I would just cry.
I'm with you. I agree with you on that aspect. We're going to get into 1 or 2 more questions here. But first, let's queue up the next question. I just had it. These comments come so quickly, so it's like,
I know,
all right, I got this one locked up, then I'm trying to find something else. This one from Janice. Will Brady still be the Bucs QB next year? Because with the 2022, next year's schedule isn't tough. We're gonna get to that in a second. Hey, it's close to New Year's. We're ready to get that rolling. But before we get to that, I just want to remind everyone that this Sunday, the Pewter PreGame show will be back starting. The Bucs have a 1:00 game. So the Pewter PreGame show will be on at noon. Casey will be on it. JC will be on it. I assume John and Scott as well, too, unless, they're busy as well. But it's a great way to start that Sunday where you're ready to watch Bucs football. It's always a lot of fun. You guys give such great analysis and insight. And so make sure you go to our YouTube channel, which, by the way, hit those like buttons, all right? Hit the thumbs up. It helps with our algorithm, so we appreciate you guys if you could do that. But yeah, the Pewter pregame show will start right around 12 o'clock on our YouTube channel. And then after that, we go into the Pewter Game Day show, which is a live in-game analysis while the Bucs are playing the Jets. Normally, it's John and our guy Paul, but for this week, because it's my New York Football Jets, or who used to be my Jets with me growing up in New York, it's going to be John and I for Bucs versus Jets. We last did Bucs and Colts, where I was on the call, and so the Bucs are 1-0 when John and I are together. But yeah, make sure you stay for that. Again, it's on our YouTube channel, so hit the like button, subscribe. Make sure you're watching that. It's a lot of fun. You know, John is really the best in the business when it comes to, you know, being able to detail a game from the stats point of it, from the, you know, the X's and O's, the way teams are lining up and trying to attack the Bucs, and the way that the Bucs are trying to attack their opponent. So there's no one better than John with that. I will give you all my insight and analysis too of just the way that the Bucs are going about trying to beat the Jets, because I've watched a lot of the Jets, and obviously I watch every single Bucs game. So it should be fun. I'll probably laugh, I'll cry, I'll have some fun with it. But make sure, yeah, the pregame show, the game day show, it's a ton of fun. You can't get any better coverage than you can with PewterReport.com. So keep an eye out on that for Sunday. Again, starting at 12, and then kickoff is at 1, and we'll get it going at 1. So back to the question about Tom Brady. Do you see him retiring before the start of next season? Because I see him playing, but curious to get your thoughts.
100%. I don't think he's retiring. Nobody mentions the fact that they can play until 50 unless they have the intention of pushing it as close to 50 as possible. I think the only thing that takes Tom Brady out of the lineup is him, you know, not feeling 100% or working through any kind of injury, or depending on where his body's at. But I mean, he just continues to excel and collect records and trophies. There's no need to hang it up when you're a guy as passionate about football as this. You know, I'm more concerned about Tom Brady post-football, because I don't know that he's going to know what to do with himself at all. This guy bleeds football. Somebody else had a great question that kind of ties into this too, was it was like, besides the retirement, it was, do you see Tom Brady playing less games next year if he does return to the Bucs? That's a great question, I thought, too, only because, you know, you do kind of have to start preparing the next man up in this franchise, ready to turn, you know, hand off the battalion to the next guy who's going to be the face of the Buccaneers and the quarterback of the Bucs. But realistically, I think it's very hard to bench a guy like the GOAT. So what are your thoughts, Matt? Is he retiring, and do you think they start minimizing his playing time next season?
Yeah, it's funny. And well, this question from Pat, we'll end on this one. But yeah, to answer that first one, I think he plays next season. But there's a couple people I've spoken to in the Bucs media that have a conspiracy theory that this could be Brady's last season, because the way that he's answered certain questions about, you know, I've loved doing this, and I'll miss doing this, and I'll miss doing that, and just certain ways that he's phrased stuff where it's like, is this his last year? And he wants everyone thinking that next year's his last year, because he doesn't want all the retirement questions. So he could just play this season. It won't be a distraction. And then he just retires and he's good to go. My thought, though, I think he plays regardless next season. But hypothetically, if the Bucs win a Super Bowl, another Super Bowl this year, which is, you know, could be very likely, you can't retire after winning 2 in a row, knowing that you could go for 3 in a row. And Brady won 3 in 4 years, but he never won 3 in a row. Mm-hmm. He's won 2 in a row. Yeah, he's won 2 in a row. But I think the fact to go for that three-peat, but then after that, like, what if they win 3 in a row? Then it's like, well, you're at 9 Super Bowls. You got to win a 10th, you know?
Yeah. Well, the other thing, too, is, like, imagine that they don't get to the Super Bowl this year, or they do and they lose. Then you're talking about one of the most competitive people in the league. Do you really see him hanging it up when the talent and the potential is there? That's the hard part. Like, he's just so into this game that it's going to have to be a poetic, like, bow tie this is the end, this is that. And I didn't say he was going to play until 50. I'm just saying the guy made a comment that he'd be happy to do so, but he just turned 44. I mean, that means that he's definitely got a year or two left in him. I don't see it happening after this season.
Yeah, and Brady said that he could play until 50, like mentally, physically, that he could. But he said too, he's a dad with 3 young kids. I don't think his older kid is any older than 12 or something like that. But he's got 3 young kids that being an NFL player, there are certain aspects of their lives that he misses. I don't have any kids, so I don't really have a place to really be in his shoes. But I'm sure he just wants to be a dad too and go to all of his kids' sporting events and recitals or whatever his kids are really into. So, that's obviously a huge factor of why he won't play until 50. But to get to this last question here from Pat Riley, Bucs have no plan B at quarterback for the next 5 years. And with Brady at quarterback, they will not have a high draft pick. So Brady must play until 50 as he promised to. So Brady's not going to play until 50, but they started putting in a contingency plan. They drafted Kyle Trask in the 2nd round of this year's NFL draft out of Florida. But I think it's a fair question. If Brady, let's just say he plays after next season and then he's done, do you really trust Kyle Trask that we haven't seen too much other than the preseason games? Could Blaine Gabbert be a guy that steps in and, fulfills Scott Reynolds' dreams and, becomes the Bucs starting quarterback? Or do the Bucs find themselves in this type of quarterback roulette situation? Because Pat's right, the Bucs aren't going to have a high draft pick. But we've seen it more and more the past couple of years with Tom Brady becoming a free agent, Phil Rivers, obviously. And then you look at this year, there's a ton of questions about, Aaron Rodgers, will Russell Wilson become available? There's a couple other quarterbacks out there. Do the Bucs kind of just get back on that roulette table and say, let's just try to go with the veteran quarterback? Because that's been the recipe to their success for their 2 Super Bowls. Brad Johnson was a veteran quarterback that came to the Bucs, and we obviously all know what's up with Tom Brady. I personally think unless they really trust Kyle Trask in 2 seasons from now, I would almost just see what veteran quarterback is out there and find out if you can win with that guy, because you're still going to have a great offense as long as you have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin there, assuming that they sign Chris Godwin. But why start this thing all over with the rookie quarterback or an inexperienced quarterback, then see who's on the market in a season from now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't completely disagree with that because you're right. There's been a lot of veteran quarterbacks that have come into franchises and just helped kind of steer them into playoffs or to a Super Bowl. My thing is just, and Jason Light's a brilliant guy, but why draft this kid to learn behind one of the best quarterbacks in the league to never give him the opportunity to lead the team? Like, there has to be a trust factor there that Tom Brady's teaching him something. Something else to keep in mind too is how much longer is Bruce Arians going to be around? Because we could be looking at a different head coach in a completely different system in, a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, and Kyle Trask may be the best guy for the job, or he may be the worst guy for the job, but you have to have your chance. I don't love the idea of how these quarterbacks have been thrusted into the NFL pace as rookies. I think it's kind of messed with some of them finding their stride and their identity and their ability to thrive long-term. But 2nd year, 3rd year in the league, you've got to be able to perform and find that NFL pace, or else you don't really have a career in this league. On top of that, I like Blaine Gabbert as a quarterback, not just because that's Scott Reynolds' guy and his dreams and fantasies would be fulfilled to see this man be the QB1 of the Bucs. But, when Jameis Winston was here, he was kind of a savior in my eyes because he'd come in and he'd be able to smartly use his legs in certain situational football. And, he has a pretty decent arm on him. So I could see them kind of, having this one-off or this 1-2 punch between Blaine Gabbert and Kyle Trask, but I don't see the purpose in drafting a guy like Trask when they drafted him, how they drafted him learning from one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and then him just being this guy that's constantly learning and in a backup position versus being put in a position to carry a team. He's got to get his chance.
Yeah, it's a very valid point. Luckily for Bucs fans, we don't really have to worry about that until a year from now. We're focused on the present, which is the Bucs have a game against the New York Jets, and then have a couple, hopefully more than one playoff game down the road in 2 weeks from now. Right before we sign off, Casey, just give me a score prediction for Bucs versus Jets on Sunday.
Ooh. I think they hit the
or
upper
take in any
30s.
direction that you want.
I'm gonna go with 38-17 feels right. I would love to see them get in the end zone more. I'm glad that Ryan Suckup had a good performance versus the Panthers, but he was 14 of those 32 points. That's kind of unnerving for someone like me. So definitely I see about 38 points for them. I see them being able to hold off the Jets as long as there's a decent amount of guys in that secondary. And we can't always count on Jordan Whitehead to save the day, but it would be great if he has another outstanding performance. He does well every game. But yeah, 38-17 feels right to me. By the way, Emily, thank you. And I got the hat from Target.
Nice. There you go.
Help.
I'm going to say, yeah. Even with everyone out, the Bucs are just so much more talented than the Jets. It's not even funny. And we'll see what happens with Antonio Brown and Mike Evans. Nonetheless, the Bucs should really have no issues beating this team. And the Jets defense has just been so bad. They haven't had a pass rusher in almost 20 years. So I'm going to say the Bucs just dominate the Jets. I think it's going to be 45-15. Bucs win to start out the new year. And that's how we finish the last podcast of this year. So thank you, everyone, for watching. For Casey Hudson, I'm Matt Matera saying we'll catch you next time on the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius. Happy New Year, everybody. Out.